Abby Martin is a visual artist and anti-imperialist journalist. She's the host of Media Roots Radio, creator of the Empire Files, which are great, by the way, and the director of the documentary Gaza Fights for Freedom. So much more that we could say, but we're so glad to have you with us. It's an honor to have you be part of this panel. We're glad it worked out, and we look forward to hearing from you. So you're on.
Thank you so much to Voices for Justice in Palestine for hosting me and for this incredibly important event. I can't wait to watch the whole thing. I wanted to briefly talk about how I became so passionate about Palestinian rights because it's relevant to why I'm part of this lawsuit in Georgia. Back in 2012, when I was working for RT, I was covering Operation Pillar of Cloud, one of the IDF assaults on Gaza, where they bombarded the Strip, killed 200 Palestinians. They bombed the Al Sharoof Journalists Tower in Gaza City, and an RT cameraman's leg was blown off. At that point, an IDF spokesperson, Avita Lebovich, said, we obviously knew there were journalists in the building and that it was justified because of the satellite on top of the roof. And they said, RT had taken a side in the coverage. They explicitly said that my coverage of the atrocities that were ongoing that week kind of justified the fact that a journalist was targeted. And of course, we know that journalists are fair game, as well as anyone in Gaza, that are deemed, enemy territory because Hamas rules the Strip. So this open admission of war crimes was absolutely appalling to me. I just couldn't believe it. And I couldn't believe the distortion of the Western media in depicting this so-called free and fair democracy that cared about human rights in the Middle East. Going to the West Bank, of course, cemented this for me. It was so much worse than I thought. We're talking about martial law, as we all know. While I was there, I tried to get into Gaza and I was banned by Netanyahu's press office and told that I was a propagandist and an enemy agent of Iran. I'm used to being called an enemy agent of Russia, so I didn't know where that came from. But that's how the Great March of Return, my film Gaza Fights for Freedom happened, where I worked with a team in Gaza, 6 journalists who filmed this incredible epic story about being inside the march. But really what the purpose of it was to document concretely the war crimes that were committed, the deliberate targeting by snipers of several protected categories under the Geneva Conventions: press, children, disabled people, and medics. And that film explicitly encouraged BDS. That was the end point of the film, was to say, what can we do about this? We have to go outside of Israeli society. We have to go to the point of solidarity with the Palestinians who are calling for us as allies to encourage the isolation, the cultural, political isolation of Israel, because that mounting pressure is the only thing that is going to bring down apartheid. And my political work for the entirety of my career has advocated BDS, because I've always understood that Palestinian rights and this issue is just adjacent to my passion for social justice, my passion for anti-war activism, my staunch anti-imperialist lens that I look at everything through in the world. I'm very, very passionate about anti-racism as well. So the advocacy of Palestinian rights is something that is crystal clear to me. It is a deeply held moral belief that I have. And so bringing me to the lawsuit, I was supposed to give a speech at a media literacy conference, ironically enough. This is something that is supposed to be an academic freedom, right? This issue of, censorship on campus that a lot of conservatives claim affect them. This is really where the fight lies today. The fact that I was supposed to give this speech on campus in February of 2020 at Georgia Southern University, and not even about Palestine. This was just about a speech about the media in general, the construct of corporate-owned media in our world today. I was given the contract that said that I could not receive an honorarium unless I signed away my rights to boycott Israel now and all in the future of my life. I was completely appalled. I had been reporting on the anti-BDS laws. Of course, as we know, they exist in around 30 or so states in the US today. I could not believe my own eyes that I was being given a contract myself as an independent contractor to receive this honorarium. We, and as we know, which I'm sure has been discussed on the program already, that it doesn't matter who you are. If you are a construction worker, if you are a substitute teacher, if you are receiving money as an independent contractor in any of these states, you are asked to forfeit your constitutional rights in order to pledge loyalty, sign a loyalty oath to a foreign nation. I mean, it was just beyond the pale to me. Of course, I could not renounce my entire political belief system. I refused to sign the contract, and the entire conference fell apart. Now, I linked up with CARE and the Partnership for Civil Justice Fund, two incredible human rights organizations, to sue the state in March of 2020. I knew that this was a violation of my free speech. I didn't know where to go with it. I felt silenced and I felt isolated. And CARE reached out to me after I tweeted about what happened. And then I just felt completely motivated and empowered, the fact that I could use my story as a vehicle to try to strike down this unconstitutional law. It was an incredible honor to do so. Of course, COVID hit, just a few, I think like the month after I filed the lawsuit. So things have been stalled for a minute. But one thing I think is really interesting that shows you that you're really on the target here is that just a day or two after filing this lawsuit, Netanyahu's Ministry of Strategic Affairs tweeted something that almost seemed to be directly responding to it. Now, I can't say that it was a direct response, but it definitely seems like it was. They basically boasted that they have lobbied state legislatures to pass these laws. They said, quote, "Whoever boycotts us will be boycotted. In recent years, we have promoted laws in most US states which determine that strong action is to be taken against whoever tries to boycott Israel." Now, here we have a foreign nation threatening economic consequences against Americans' constitutional rights. It's just unbelievable. It's beyond the pale and outrageous that people have to choose between their constitutional freedoms and their ability to work in these states in the US. Boycotts have a rich political history. They're fundamental to bringing down oppressive regimes and laws like apartheid in South Africa, like the civil rights era, the Montgomery bus boycotts. This is why the Supreme Court of the United States recognized the right to boycott in 1982 on the heels of boycotts against Jim Crow apartheid in this country. I mean, imagine like the state of Alabama saying you can't work here if you engaged in the Montgomery bus boycott during that time. I mean, it's just unbelievable. It's completely egregious. And I think that if you were to ask the average American on the street, they would be completely shocked that these laws exist. Because as was noted, you can boycott the state of Georgia. You can boycott the United States. So why are we signing fealty over to a foreign country? And the absurdity of it all, with all of this talk about Russia puppeting our political system. I mean, just imagine Israel being replaced with any other country, and the reaction from the political establishment if these laws were just being passed under the radar, with anything else replacing the state of Israel as mandating American citizens to not have to boycott in order to work. These laws obviously have to be overturned. We can't trust politicians to overturn these laws. They're more worried about their own political careers, despite the constitutional implications of these. And we actually saw how Georgia's legislature brought an Israeli consulate official to try to make my case moot. I mean, render the case moot and throw it out, essentially. And it is just the most open admission of foreign interference. They're actually bringing an Israeli official to the hearing in Georgia. I mean, I just couldn't believe that happened. And I think that judges, luckily have signed on the right side of history here, that we've seen in Kansas, Texas, Arizona, and now Arkansas deem this law unconstitutional, which has given me great hope that hopefully Georgia will do the right thing, even though they are trying to vote on rendering it moot. And just to give a little bit more context, I'm sure has been stated, they're trying to increase the honorarium cap for independent contractors to $100,000. So I was being, I was going to be given $1,000 to speak at the university. They're trying to raise that to $100,000 so they can still keep the law in place. They still don't want to usurp, this law that has been so heavily influenced by Israel and, of course, admittedly lobbied by Israel. They just want to make it, so people like me can't really do anything about it. Luckily, the lawsuit is still going forward because this is still a complete violation of our constitutional liberties. So even if they do throw this out on the case that they can up the money, the financial givings, we will still move forward with the lawsuit. So two prominent Jewish organizations have also filed amicus briefs to support the case that actually explicitly do not believe in BDS as a solution, which I think shows you how dangerous they understand the criminalization of BDS to be. And, as someone who has been inside 48, as someone who's spent quite a bit of time in the West Bank, I understand that there is no left within Israeli society. I understand that there is no hope from within Israel. I have talked to dozens of Israeli citizens. You don't need to talk to many to understand the genocidal bloodlust that runs through the society and has to in order to dehumanize the population that they're ethnically cleansing still. You need to galvanize support from outside of the country. I mean, leftist is considered a slur. Leftists in Israeli society think that the occupation should be more humane. Anti-Zionists flee because typically they have other passports and stuff like that. They don't need to stay within such a racist, increasingly fascistic society. And that's, again, brings me to why BDS is something that I passionately believe in, why I am suing the state of Georgia because of this deeply held moral compass of mine. And I do think that this is working, of course. I mean, BDS is becoming more popular and is becoming widely internationally recognized as the solution, as the thing that people need to be doing. The divestment campaigns, not only at college campuses, which have been tremendously successful, but all over the world, unions in Britain, Palestinian rights organizations everywhere have been doing this. Look at the artists who dropped out of the Meteor Festival in Israel just over the last few years. They dropped like flies because of the pressure from their fans. I mean, that really says something when Lana Del Rey has to, drop out and all of these other people. And that shows you the success of BDS. It shows you that it is completely untenable for people to associate themselves with such a racist military occupation. They understand the situation, at least peripherally, and they understand that it's not worth it to attach their name to such a state. And just think about how much money Israel has thrown into pinkwashing, pretending like it's this haven of gay rights and liberalism and democracy and paying people. I mean, not only the multi-million-dollar campaign going into pinkwashing society, but paying people with birthright to come and brainwash them and these propaganda tours. I mean, so much money, right? Billions of dollars invested into this idea. But that's what it is. It's an idea, and the idea has run out of steam because people can see the truth with their own eyes. And Palestinian activists, I think, are feeling the brunt of censorship here in the US, which is why these anti-BDS laws are really targeting them, and which is why we see the executive order that Trump left office signing that criminalized, BDS activism on campus. This is the forefront of the free speech issue today. This is the forefront of the civil rights fight today, are these anti-BDS laws. And I really, really like how this event was framed, as the idea that progressive except for Palestine is over. And it has been for a while. Of course, the Biden administration and the corporate-owned liberal media from CNN to NPR, they all keep obfuscating the truth and making it seem like you can be on the left, but you can still be Zionist. Look, we all know that that is not true in actual progressive spaces anymore, and it has not been for years. The narrative is not sticking. It does not work anymore because, again, people can see the truth with their own eyes. The advent of social media, it doesn't matter how many war rooms are being activated to correct the record online. Palestinians are filming their reality for themselves, and Westerners are seeing that reality aghast with their own eyes all over the world. And, you know, Israel and its allies have deflected all of this criticism, all of this rightful criticism of their apartheid state, ethnic cleansing and colonization, by smearing concerned human rights activists as bigots. That's their goal, right? That's their modus operandi. But that is not working anymore. That is not working anymore. We see that in polling directly. Just look at Democratic polling alone. I mean, you can look at like Bernie Sanders' campaign, even the Jewish Vermont senator who was running for president and who actually brought up Palestinian rights several times during the campaign. 4 years prior to that, he barely mustered Palestine. He was actually confronted at a campaign event, and he could barely condemn the assault on Gaza that was happening at the time. And then you fast forward 4 years and he's talking about withdrawing illegal settlements to the 1967 borders and withholding aid and leveraging aid. I mean, that's a testament to the movement. That's a testament to the strength of BDS and the solidarity movement with Jewish Voices for Peace, with activists walking off birthright. Look at the Democratic polling itself. In Gallup's annual polling, they ask Democratic Party voters what their views are on the Israel-Palestine conflict. For the first time ever, a majority, 53%, said the US should apply more pressure to Israel as opposed to Palestine to make compromises. That is huge, right? 53% up from 43% just 2 years ago, a decade ago. This position didn't crack 38%. That really tells you all you need to know. And a lot of these people don't understand how crystal clear the situation is, right? They still think it's complicated and that these are peoples who've been fighting for thousands of years. They don't understand the very crystal clear issue that this is a colonizer, colonized, oppressor, oppressed, right? This is something that's so obvious. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's our goal, is political education, making people realize what the situation is, what the reality is, and how obvious the solution is. How obvious the solution is. It's not anti-Semitic, right? This is a weaponization of anti-Semitism to try to tap down and on rightful criticism of apartheid and actions that can actually take down apartheid and have successfully taken down apartheid in the past. South Africa still exists, right? No one is calling to have Israel fall. People want equal rights. They want democracy. There are 5 million Palestinians who are living under either an open-air prison where everything's dictated by Israel, or 3 million people in the West Bank who are living under brutal martial law. Those people deserve equal rights and they deserve a democratic voice. And the only thing that's preventing accountability for Israel is really the United States empire. It's the US empire that has been this sordid, undying alliance that has just provided this staunch shield around Israel and has prevented them from really facing any scrutiny whatsoever. They have their propaganda arm, they have their legal system, as we can see, the laws that have been passed to run cover for Israel. And it is absolutely absurd. The fact that the ICC has finally allowed an avenue of accountability gives us the avenue to build pressure against our own government, because I truly believe, as American citizens, this is why I'm so passionate about this, because my government is subsidizing these atrocities every day with millions of dollars. And it is up to us. It is our duty to act and to organize, because we can organize and build mass movements to link these struggles together, and we can make apartheid fall once and for all. And I want to leave you with this anecdote, is that 15 years ago during the Iraq War, organizing, millions of anti-war activists organized against the Iraq War here in the US, Free Palestine banners were not allowed. I remember being told that this is a different struggle. This is too controversial. We can't, in good conscience, allow messages of Free Palestine and Palestinian rights to interfere with the calls to stop the invasion of Iraq. Fast forward till today, you are not welcome in progressive spaces unless you are pro-Palestine. And that's the difference. And again, that is because of the movement. That is because of the work. That is because of the efforts. We can win and we will win. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you giving me the time.
Awesome. I the only thing I can say was you were well worth the wait. We're glad you came. I'm looking throughout the chat and the Q&A for questions, and I'm not seeing many questions. What I'm seeing is a lot of yay, agree, right on, God bless you, protect you, keep going, thank you, thank you, thank you. So I hope you're feeling affirmed. We're so grateful for what you've shared with us. It builds beautifully, as you'll see when you go back to the whole webinar, on Omar's brilliant statement in the beginning about BDS and how it fits into the struggle to decolonize Palestinian minds, certainly to decolonize Israeli society, and to fight back hard against racism and oppression. And then the BDS toolkit presentation from Jeff and Nushin laid out really good concrete strategies for groups to join in the struggle. And then here comes your presentation, passionate and fiery, about the importance of maintaining our constitutional rights to boycott Israel and to be part of that struggle for solidarity. So thank you again. It's wonderful. And I let me look back. And while I've been talking, there may have been a question or two come in. And while I'm looking, let me just ask you one. I wasn't clear from your answer whether your lawsuit has been structured in such a way that it can challenge the underlying fraudulent principle of the law, regardless of the dollar amount. I mean, in other words, is it more than just you being able to recover any losses? How does it address the fact that now there's this larger threshold which challenges any future standing against the law? If you could just comment a little bit about that, and I'll look for some more questions.
Yes, thank you. That is important. And I was actually really happy to hear from my lawyer, Mara Verheyden Hillard, after that threshold had been challenged and they had tried to throw that out. She told me, no, we're still moving forward because this is much bigger than just a dollar amount, because this is something, the way that she described it, and is that they are moving forward with the lawsuit regardless of what they do, because it's you can't put a price tag on your freedom of speech. And so we're going to move forward with just challenging the overall freedom of speech issue, whether or not the financial amount is acknowledged or not, because this is something much bigger than that. So I'm very happy to hear that, because I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. As we know, judges have declared different things, and that's why there is a possibility that this could go ultimately to the Supreme Court. But I am happy to hear that we are moving forward to challenge the underlying notion of the law, with the premise that you cannot put a price tag on losing your speech.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. All right. There was one comment that I suppose speaks for all of us. We were worried when you couldn't join us earlier that something untoward had happened to you. So we're glad to see you up and well and with your full voice in effect. A couple of questions. There was a couple people made the comment that there's all this talk about cancel culture and anti-cancel culture, and someone was wondering, even though it has admitted right-wing elements to it, it's been seized upon by right-wing elements, far-right elements in the United States. You're a victim, you have been a victim in some ways of cancel culture. It's just looked at differently. What would you say about that? Is that an angle for highlighting your case and other cases like it, and the whole question of suppressing dissent and weaponizing the anti-Semitism as a way of crushing academic dissent, activist dissent, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think this is one of the fundamental problems today with the conversation around cancel culture, is that, big tech, of course, admittedly, and we see proof of that, purging QAnon accounts and conservative accounts, and of course, Trump. And that's what makes media headlines. But at the same time, pro-Palestine activists and Palestinian voices have been purged, have been targeted, have been censored for a very long time, right? And this is never covered in the same way. And that's why it's so, of course, dangerous to cheer on or encourage this kind of censorship on the tech side. But that aside, I mean, yeah, of course. But my question is, why aren't we hearing about the coverage of these accounts and these people being silenced? You know, whether it be Facebook or Twitter, this is very clearly happening, and it is very, very much a slippery slope. In terms of just in a broader sense, yeah, absolutely. I mean, cancel culture is something that has been hijacked by conservatives and conservatism, and they've kind of victimized themselves, whether it be Milo Yiannopoulos, you know, not being able to speak on college campuses because he's heckled, or Ben Shapiro, or anyone like that. And they get huge headlines for that, right? But what about these laws? This is the ultimate example and the ultimate, you know, kind of thing about cancel culture is that there are actually state mandated laws in 30 states or so that restrict your constitutional rights. And the fact that those are not covered, the fact that this has been completely done under the radar, I think really tells you everything you need to know, that this is a manufactured debate. And, you know, the ultimate expression of cancel culture is silencing Palestinian voices. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why is that so dangerous to the establishment? That's what censorship is. Censorship is not, you're getting heckled on college campuses, you're getting protested. Censorship is when the state passes a law that restricts your speech, right? That is the textbook definition of censorship. So I am always very quizzical that this is not covered in the way that it should be. The only thing that I can think of is that, again, Israel is such a third rail issue, and people don't want to be brandished with this ridiculous accusation of anti-Semitism that has been weaponized so efficiently that they just refuse to question these things. But it's so obvious to me. I mean, this is just such a violation, just such a clear-cut violation of our civil liberties, that it's inexcusable at this time. And especially now that we see polling has shifted and public consciousness has shifted on the issue. Where are you? You know, are you going to be standing on the right side of history, or are you not going to be? Because it's time to pick a side, and it's time to stand on the right side. And if we don't stand together, we're going to lose. But absolutely, I mean, cancel culture needs to be connected to this. And if that's how people will listen, sure. But my question is the people who already know this is going on and refuse to cover it. And it's just inexcusable.
All right. That's a good and rousing challenge to all of us. And probably a good place for us to wind up. We did see a note in the excuse me, in the chat that Omar had to go to another engagement, but what a great blessing to have him at the leadership level of the BDS movement and with us today on the panel. Also, warm thanks to Jeff and Nasheen for their work on the BDS toolkit and leading us through that, and to you, Abby, for your passion and all the best in the lawsuit. There were lots of signs in the chat of people who are really hoping and praying and advocating for you and for this case. And we all
Mark,
go well.
Mark, I wanted to add one more thing really quickly that I just realized. There's something in Georgia called the Campus Free Speech Act, and it has been passed by conservative legislatures, backed by lobbying forces like the Heritage Foundation and things like that. And what it does is actually say that speech, like Nazi adjacent speech, right, and fascist adjacent speech should be protected, right? So that you have this kind of stark contradiction actually within Georgia itself, that you have this law called the Campus Free Speech Act that protects speech, that we're talking about this, you know, bemoaning about cancel culture conservatives like that, but at the same time, this anti-BDS law that actually restricts our freedoms and prevents us from speaking out about Israel. So it's just quite a fascinating turn of events.
Well, bringing moral fervor to such a cynical pursuit, which is to completely bastardize the freedoms and the morality inherent in civil rights. Wow, amazing.